Hello friend, welcome back to my kitchen. My name is Becky if you're new. Today we are going to be using some garden fresh produce. I just went and harvested a bunch of sage, thyme, celery, and parsley. We're going to be making 2 Thanksgiving sides, 2 Thanksgiving desserts, and an appetizer. All these recipes could be made the day or 2 or 3 days in advance of Thanksgiving, and they all have a little bit of a twist to what you think these traditional recipes would be. So let's get these washed up so we can get cooking. This oven, I just preheated to 375 because we are going to make our cranberry cheesecake. I've never made this before and it sounds so good in this oven. And over here, I preheated it to 350 because we are gonna make an upside down caramel apple cake in this one. A couple things I did is I went shopping downstairs earlier today to kind of get ready for today. I grabbed some potatoes and onions from the garden. I baked a loaf of bread because we're gonna use this to make our cranberry apple stuffing. And then I collected some eggs for the recipes we need. I pulled out some butter and cream cheese. I shopped for some chicken broth for the stuffing, grabbed some apples and different fresh produce items we need for the recipes we're making today. I absolutely love the traditional recipes when it comes to Thanksgiving. We have our family favorites. So that's why I thought it'd be fun to test out some new recipes that have just a little bit of a twist so that we can see if we like any of these and we want to try any of these on our Thanksgiving table this year. So we're gonna start with the cheesecake, and we need to make the crust. Instead of using graham crackers, this has digestive cookies. I have never bought these before. It said in the recipe you can substitute graham crackers, but I thought I would try this because I've never tried it before. And it is an imported cookie. It took me about 15 minutes to find this in the grocery store yesterday. Malteves, the original. That's really good. It tastes like a graham cracker, but kind of an elevated version of a graham cracker. I would say it's a little bit saltier than a graham cracker, and that is really good. But it does taste like one. So if you can't find these in your store, you can substitute graham crackers. So we need 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. 2 tablespoons of powdered sugar, and 5 tablespoons of melted butter, along with a pinch of salt. I, of course, will link all these recipes down below. One way my mom and I like to have a stress-free event if we're hosting something like Thanksgiving or Christmas or just a party in general is we do like to try to make quite a few of the recipes in advance if possible. My mom and I do have a course on hosting events, so if you're interested in that, I can link that down below. But here we are taking our crust and we're gonna get that into a springform pan, which I have here. I'm gonna take my spatula and I'm gonna push down this crust so that we have an even layer. I love making cheesecakes for parties because they seem so impressive, but they are relatively easy to make. And they're one of the things that almost tastes better if you make it a day or 2 or 3 in advance. And a cranberry cheesecake is nothing I've ever had before, so I'm excited to try this. Okay, so that is our crust right there. So we already have that done. How easy was that? We're gonna pop this into our preheated 370-degree oven for 8 minutes, and that's about how long it should take us to get the filling made up. I think I'm gonna use my food processor to make the filling. I've never done that before, but we're gonna give it a try so I don't have to mess up one more appliance. So in here, let me go rinse it out first so that we don't have crumbs in it. I changed my mind. We're gonna need the mixer for the apple upside down cake, so might as well go ahead and get it out for the cheesecake. So here we've got our mixer. So the 2 savory recipes we're gonna be making are a Gruyere cheese potato, how do you say that? I'm probably gonna butcher this, but it's a potato au gratin, and it is an adapted recipe from Julia Childs, and you can't go wrong with Gruyere cheese and potatoes and cream. And then we're gonna make a caramelized onion warm dip, which I think is gonna be really good too. Okay, so in here, you know what? I need to set my timer for my crust. And then the last recipe is going to be that cranberry apple stuffing, which I'm excited to try. And it has sausage in it too. So here for the cream cheese filling, I'm excited to share with you how easy this is. We started with a 1/4 cup of sour cream, pinch of salt. The cool thing about cheesecakes is you can adapt these recipes so easily depending on what season it is and what flavors you want to do. And I think a cranberry cheesecake is going to be perfect for the holidays. This would be good for Christmas or Thanksgiving. 3 eggs, 2 room temperature blocks of cream cheese, a healthy splash of vanilla, maybe 2, 3/4 cups of white sugar. I just washed this orange really well because we are gonna zest 1 entire navel orange into the cream cheese cake mixture portion. Orange and cranberry are just a perfect combination. Now we're gonna beat this together until really smooth. The timer just went off for our crust, and I'm glad that I took it out when I did because it looks like it's got some really beautiful color. It smells fantastic. Now we need to reduce the temperature to 325 because we are going to bake this cheesecake at a lower temperature. So while that's coming down from 375, let's get this filled. I want to put this on here so I remember that this is hot. I think I should have had my cream cheese a little bit more room temperature than it was, but I think it's gonna be okay. We're gonna get this in here. It smells incredible. I love the idea of just having the zest in here without any juice. Our oven is ready for us, and this recipe does not state to bake this cream cheese in a bain-marie, which makes it an even easier recipe. If you are not aware, a bain-marie is where you bake a cheesecake in a water bath. So you would take a roaster pan, you would wrap your cheesecake with 2 layers of foil, you would put that in your roaster pan, and then you would put boiling water around the cheesecake, and it lets the cheesecake bake at a more gentle bake, but this recipe doesn't call for it, so I'm not gonna use it. So now we're gonna go ahead and get our upside down apple cake in the other oven. But before I can do that, I'm gonna go ahead and just rinse out this bowl and we'll reuse this bowl. For the upside down apple caramel cake, we need to slice the apples first because this is what is gonna be on the bottom of the cake, and then we will obviously flip it over. So let me grab a cutting board. So I think I'm gonna go ahead and get this done first. These are the apples from our orchard. And so I just have to make sure that there's no bug damage or anything like that on them. And the way that we arrange the apples in this tin is the way that it's basically gonna be the decoration for the cake. So we wanna make sure we take a minute to arrange them nicely so that it looks nice when we have our final cake done. I just grabbed 2 little apples. I may need to go grab some more apples for this, but we'll just see how far this gets us. Those 2 little apples were perfect for this, so now we can make the batter, and we need to make the caramel sauce too. The timer just went off for the cheesecake, and I think it's done. When I jiggle it, it's got a nice little jiggle to it, so what I'm gonna do is go ahead and turn the oven off and leave the door cracked, and we're gonna let it cool down just like this. I've got everything out we need to make the caramel sauce. This should come together really fast. I like making these upside down cakes because you don't have to frost it. So once you've baked the cake, the decoration and everything is already done. This is the first time I'm making this recipe, but I've made a lot of upside down cakes in the past, and they always turn out really beautiful. So that's 6 tablespoons of butter. We're gonna put a pinch of salt in there and let that melt together with a 1/2 cup of packed brown sugar, a little bit of cinnamon, and that needs to come to a boil and boil for 1 minute. We need to slice up this bread, so maybe I will go ahead and put this stuff away and then we can start slicing that bread while we wait for that to come to a boil. This is my no-knead bread recipe, and I just made it up this morning, knowing that we could just slice it up and toast it for the stuffing. Because we're gonna be baking the bread in the oven, I figured I could toast this at the same time in the oven while the cake is baking. If you've never made bread before, this is one of the easiest bread recipes. I would highly encourage you try it because it's so easy and it turns out so yummy every time. So I'm gonna cut this into chunks. I can hear my butter over there. I think we need to give it a stir. I don't want this to burn. I'm gonna cut the heat and we're gonna add our vanilla. I just poured my caramel over top the apples, and that is going to be the top, so now we can make our batter. But I think before we make the batter, I'm just gonna quickly finish dicing up this bread so that I can pop this in the oven and we can get our bread to start toasting. To make this stuffing, you do not need to have homemade bread, but if you've never made stuffing with homemade bread, friend, let me tell you, it is incredible. And the cool thing about if you make stuffing with homemade bread, is stuffing is supposed to be made with stale bread. So you can make the bread way ahead of time, just leave it out, chop it up, let it get stale on the counter, and then you can make the actual stuffing a few days in advance. Keep that in the fridge and pop it in the oven or crock pot. You can make stuffing in the crock pot too and heat it on Thanksgiving. So you can kind of do it in different steps so you can have a delicious homemade version or buy the breadcrumbs at the store. We like those too. But I want to go ahead and bake these in the oven while we bake our cake. For the cake batter, we're gonna start with a 1/2 cup of brown sugar, a 1/2 cup of white sugar, and a 1/2 cup of butter. And it does not need to be melted. It says just room temperature. And we're gonna mix these two together. I just added 1.5 cups of all-purpose flour, 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder, salt, and now I'm gonna grate in some fresh nutmeg. This makes all the difference when it comes to nutmeg. Fresh nutmeg if you can, with a microplane, phenomenal. The last thing we need to add for this cake is our cinnamon, and that is done. So how easy is this recipe? We're just gonna mix this until well combined. This is definitely a little bit of a thicker batter because it uses room temperature butter as opposed to an oil or even a really soft or melted butter. And that is our cake batter. So easy, Smells phenomenal. I'm gonna get all the batter off the beater. This is definitely a thick batter. So I'm gonna just, I think, dollop it over top our caramel and then spread it out over top the caramel. My kitchen is a little bit cold right now, and so that's probably why my batter's a little bit thick, because my butter, even though it's room temperature, was definitely on the cooler side. Into the oven it goes. We've got quite a bit done already. Our cheesecake, the oven is pretty much cool. The cheesecake still has some warmth to it. We still have a topping we're gonna put on, but we're gonna wait until this cheesecake is completely cool before we do that. I think we baked it to perfection. So I'm gonna let this sit on the counter until it cools a little bit more, and then I'm gonna pop this in the fridge. Let's go ahead and get going on making the veggie, yummy, delicious part and sausage part of the stuffing. I was just rereading the recipe that I'm getting inspired from to make this stuffing, and it has quite a few things that I don't usually add to stuffing. It has liver in it, which I don't have any liver in my house, and I don't think I would add that even if I did. What I think I'm gonna do instead is take my grandma's stuffing recipe, and I'm going to add apples and cranberries, which is what I was getting inspired from this one particular recipe. And so I'm just gonna follow my grandma's recipe and then use inspiration from the recipe I just found and add the apples and cranberries to it. So the first thing we need to do is melt butter. And while the butter's melting, I'm going to process and prep our vegetables. So we've got celery here that I've washed from the garden. I just harvested it this morning. And then 2 onions I harvested from the garden a couple weeks ago. I think we only need 1 onion actually for this, so I'm gonna set that one back. Oh goodness, my spatula's catching on fire. I'm gonna season this with salt, pepper, and now I'm gonna go ahead and chop up the herbs we need for this. Got some fresh sage, fresh parsley, and some thyme. For the thyme, I don't think I'm gonna chop it a ton, so I'm just going to run my fingers across it and kind of pull off some of the leaves. Maybe I'll run my knife through it once. Perfect. I almost forgot the apples. The recipe did not say to peel the apples, but I'm going to peel them before I dice them. I think we'll like that texture better. I'm really happy with how the apple turns out in this recipe. It does add a nice kind of sweetness and different textural element. And I will share with you as we go on what I think about the cranberries that we are going to add. So I'm just going to get these diced up to kind of like a medium, smallish dice, maybe a little bit bigger than the onions. And we're going to get the apples and herbs all in with the onions to saute and soften. And I figured while that is going, why don't I go ahead and get the dishwasher unloaded because it is now clean, so that as we continue to cook throughout this day, I can just go ahead and load the dishes, and I can try to keep my sink a little bit less full, and that way it will be more enjoyable to be in the kitchen. I tend to like to be in the kitchen more if I can clean up as I go. Doesn't always happen, but when it does, I prefer it. So that's why I'm going to take a minute to go ahead and get the dishes that we've already used loaded in the dishwasher now that the dishwasher has been unloaded. So the apples and onions are almost perfect. We're going to give them about a couple minutes more, and then we are going to make our stuffing. I went ahead and I transferred the breadcrumbs into this oven because the parchment paper was starting to burn in that oven. That oven is a propane oven. This oven is an electric oven. And I really shouldn't put parchment paper in that oven because that tends to happen. So this is nice and toasty now. So we're going to get our bread into this bowl. The nice thing too, when you make your own bread for stuffing, is you get to decide what size you want to cut them. And I chose to keep them a little bit bigger this time, just so that it has a little bit more rustic feel and it will feel a little bit more homemade, because the cubes that you buy when you buy them already dried are pretty small. So that was just a stylistic choice. So now we've got our vegetables and our apples, which we almost forgot about. And we still need to get the sausage cooked up. What I should have done is cook the sausage first and then put all the vegetables on top of the sausage. But I truly forgot about the sausage as well. So I'm gonna get this in here with all the butter and goodness. That's part of the recipe. And now we're gonna go cook the sausage in this same pan. I don't think we're gonna need any oil because the sausage has it in it. I have 1 pound of breakfast sausage that we're gonna cook up until nice and golden brown. I wanna get this into the fridge, so I'm gonna take the springform portion off of it. So I'm gonna use a knife to have it kind of come away from the edge. So hopefully it comes out of this springform pan really nicely. The color on this cheesecake is just incredible, just from the orange zest and the farm fresh eggs. Okay, moment of truth here. Doesn't want to come off this side. Oh, there we go. I'm gonna pop that in the fridge. That is stunning. It's not the tallest cheesecake I've ever made. Usually cheesecakes are twice this size when I make it, but cheesecake is so rich. I think that this is gonna be just delicious. It's gonna have a really good crust to cheese ratio. My favorite part of cheesecake is the crust anyway, so I am perfectly okay with that. I went ahead and I put a piece of foil over top of the apple cake because that's what the recipe said to do. It said that if you don't, then what will happen is the top will get too brown before the inside is cooked. So I went ahead and did that. We've got our sausage going. So while we're waiting for that to go, we're gonna go ahead and get going on our potato gratin. And we are going to be using russet potatoes. These are from this year's garden. I'm so proud of these potatoes. I'm gonna peel the potatoes we need for this recipe, and then I'm gonna run to the sink and wash them. They've already been washed once, but I know that they need to be washed again before we can put them into our dish. This recipe looks like it's gonna come together in no time. We don't actually have to make a cheese sauce. Well, we're gonna make a cheese sauce, kind of, but it's gonna bake all in the oven at the same time. When I've made potato gratins before, you make like a bechamel sauce on the stove and then you pour that on, but this totally skips that step, so I'm pretty excited about that. If I can skip a step and save some time, that's always a win in my book. And this is an adapted recipe from Julia Child's Cookbook. I need 2.5 pounds of a starchy potato. And these are russets. You know what? My sausage is done. So I'm gonna rinse my hands real quick and we're gonna finish our stuffing. Here's the baking dish we're gonna serve our stuffing in. And get our sausage in here. You know what? I'm gonna go take this back to the stove and I'm gonna deglaze this pan with our chicken broth. I do not wanna waste all those yummy flavors. This not only is gonna increase the flavor of our stuffing, but it's gonna make cleanup when I have to clean this pan a little bit easier as well, because I won't have to do quite as much scrubbing on it. The last ingredient is cranberries, dried cranberries. I also added 4 cups of broth, and it might look like a ton of broth, but these breadcrumbs are completely dried out from being toasted, and they will absorb all of this 4 cups. At first I was like, oh no, that looks like way too much broth, but not to worry, I let it sit and it absorbs all of the broth. I'm just gonna let this sit for a minute and absorb that moisture. The timer just went off for the apple upside down cake, and I think it's done. Feels done to me. So I'm gonna set this here. We need to set a timer for 10 minutes. We need that to cool for 10 minutes and then we can turn it upside down. I finished peeling the potatoes. So now I need to wash the potatoes, wash my cutting board, and we can slice them up. We're gonna make our gratin in this white baking dish. Got our washed potatoes. And we need to cut them as thin as possible. No more than 1/8 of an inch. So this is gonna take me a minute. I went ahead and I did sharpen my knife and washed it, and so it's gonna make this process a whole lot easier by having a really sharp knife. I'm using the back of my knuckle as a guide, and I'm just slowly moving my finger this way, and I'm resting my knife up against my knuckle, and I'm actually having my knife touch my knuckle the whole time so that I have more control over how thick my slices are. So it's actually my fingernail that's moving, not my knife that's moving, and I'm just keeping the knife on my finger. There you can kind of see how thin I'm trying to aim for. Very, very thin. Another trick when using a knife and having more control is to hold the knife with your thumb and your pointer finger on the actual blade and then wrap your fingers around the knife. Instead of having your finger up here, you're gonna have a lot more control if you're holding the blade like this. Or instead of holding it like this, you have a lot less control over where the knife's going. Kind of sacrificing the little end because I can't have good control. So it is not going to be added, but that'll be okay. Now that we have our potatoes cut, we need to grate our Gruyere cheese. Gruyere is one of my favorite cheeses. I made macaroni and cheese recently with Gruyere cheese, and it was some of the best macaroni I have ever had. It's a good melting cheese, but it also has that kind of like funkiness you want from a good cheese, which sometimes you don't usually get that really funkiness unless it's a really hard cheese and it doesn't melt that well. And Gruyere cheese has a good melting point and a good funkiness to it. So I don't know, I've got 2 blocks. I actually bought 3 little blocks because I wasn't sure. I need 2.5 cups, I believe. There is a rind though on it, so you have to cut both parts off. I don't think you can eat that. My chickens will eat it though. So we can put it in the compost and they'll eat it. I think my timer is gonna go off for the apple cake before we can actually assemble this, but this is gonna be really easy to assemble. So I wanna make sure oh yeah, this is more than enough cheese. I'm not gonna open that third little block I bought. I'm just gonna grate this and we'll use these 2 little chunks of cheese I bought. In the recipe, if you can't find Gruyere cheese, there are substitutes and alternatives you can use that are written down in the recipe. My timer just went off, so it's the moment of truth. See if we can unveil this cake without messing up. This part always makes me nervous. I've never had an upside down cake not come out of the pan, so I'm hoping that today is not the day. It doesn't feel like it's coming out. Let's see. Oh, there we go. You don't want it to wait too long and have it cool back in the pan. Oh, shoot. Because the the caramel sauce will stick to the pan. So we lost a few apples. That's okay. I'm just gonna go ahead and put the apples back on the top. And I think that's beautiful. It smells fantastic. This is why you don't want to wait too long when flipping it out, because it'll just stick right back to the cookie sheet. Or cookie sheet, what is this called? Pie sheet. I just tasted some of that caramel apple topping. So good. Now, this is gonna cool. You can make this a day in advance and just cover it and keep it out. The way that I like to serve these upside down cakes is with homemade whipped cream. So one recipe completely done. So I'm gonna set this aside and let this cool on the counter while we finish making our gratin. We are ready to assemble our gratin, but first I need to grease this pan because this is going to be super sticky. Could use butter here, but I'm just gonna go ahead and use some nonstick spray. And now we're gonna take our really thinly sliced potatoes and we're gonna do 1/3 of them on the bottom of this gratin. And we have not seasoned the potatoes or anything like that, so we're gonna do that in just a minute. The reason I like to cut the potatoes so thin is because they almost melt back together when they cook and it creates a really yummy texture. I've made gratins where I've cut them too thick and they don't cook as well in the oven and they don't kind of melt back together, which is what I want. And I can tell, like this one, I did not cut that thin enough, so I'm gonna go ahead and cut that in half right now. And then we're gonna add some of our Gruyere cheese. You know what I'm gonna do first? I'm gonna season our potatoes with some pepper. And salt. And now our cheese. So we're gonna make our cheese sauce right in this baking dish. And then we need to sprinkle with some garlic powder. This is green garlic powder because it has garlic scapes in it from the garden. Now we're gonna put half of our cream, more potatoes, you're supposed to not top this with the cheese. Now we need to season this with salt and pepper and garlic. And the rest of our cheese, because we're not going to top this with cheese. And then we're going to top it with the rest of our potatoes. If I need to slice a few more potatoes to cover the cheese, I'll do that. Oh, almost forgot. Some cream. I was just thinking, have any of you ever done a sweet potato gratin? I love sweet potatoes. I don't know what you would, if you would use a cream with that, because that might be a little bit weird. I don't usually associate putting cream with sweet potatoes, but I'm gonna have to look that up. Some sort of scalloped sweet potato dish just The texture of that I think could be phenomenal, and the flavor, but I'm not exactly sure what that would look like. So I need to do some research on that because I like savory sweet potatoes. So I would look for a savory scalloped sweet potato dish. I think I cut the perfect amount of potatoes. I don't think I need to cut any more. I'm gonna finish this top layer with just a little bit more salt. And then we're gonna finish topping this with our cream. I'm trying to get this evenly distributed here. A little bit of cream on all of them. I think I'm gonna take a pastry brush and just make sure each potato has some cream on it. I'm gonna top this with a couple sprigs of thyme. I'm gonna cover this with foil. And this is going into the oven for a good hour and 15 minutes, but for the first hour, 45 minutes or so, it's gonna be covered in foil. I think our stuffing is ready. So let me show you, now that this has been sitting, our stuffing looks absolutely perfect. It absorbed all of that broth. And we're gonna get, oh my goodness, I am so excited about this. I think this is gonna be so incredible with the sweet cranberry and the apple, and of course the sausage, onion, and celery. Look how beautiful this is with the big chunks of bread. Oh my goodness, friend, this is going to be a winner, I think. We'll do a taste test. So now I'm gonna go ahead and get this covered as well, and we can get this in the same oven. When we're talking about make ahead, the recipes that I've been making today, this stuffing, what I would do if I wasn't gonna bake this for us to eat for dinner tonight, I would take it right at this step, pop it in the refrigerator, or I would put it in a crock pot and I would heat it the day of the party. You can make this a few days in advance, but what you'll wanna do is when you go to reheat it, check it. If it seems a little dry, add a little bit of extra broth and then pop it in the oven. The gratin, on the other hand, needs to be pre-baked, and then you're gonna warm it already from the cook stage. And I need to make some room. Get those both in there. And the cheesecake, of course, you can make that in advance and keep it in the fridge. We still have an appetizer we're gonna make right now, and we need to make the topping for the cream cheese for the cheesecake. But I wanna go ahead and kind of refresh the kitchen a little bit. I've got a bunch of savory stuff out. There's bowls that we're done using. There's cutting boards that need to be washed off. So if you wanna see the reality of what the kitchen looks like at this moment, this is what it looks like. I'm gonna get this cream in the fridge because we didn't quite use that whole pint. We do need the cutting board for one more thing, but I do want to make sure I get it nice and washed off before we use it for that thing. Now that we've got everything in the oven, we're gonna make the cranberry sauce for the cranberry orange cheesecake. I just added a 1/4 cup of water to our saucepan. And now I'm gonna add 2 tablespoons of sugar, 1 cup of cranberries. We're gonna cook this until the cranberries burst and become a jam-like consistency. It'll probably take about 8 minutes, it said. While that's cooking, we're gonna get going on the dip. So the first thing we need to do is cook up some bacon. I have some bacon that I purchased from a local farm, and it's got some really good meat to it. I'm gonna cook all this up. We need 6 slices. This is probably a little bit more than we need. I'm gonna cook it all up. Whatever I don't end up using for this recipe, I will just stick in my fridge and use for something else. I'm gonna add just a splash of orange juice. We need to caramelize onions, and so this is a perfect time to get this going as well. This dip, all of it can be assembled the day before, and then you can just heat it the day of the party. So it says here that we need 4 large onions sliced thinly. I'm gonna pull these out and we're gonna get these sliced. So these can be caramelizing. These are gonna take a good 30 minutes to 40 minutes to caramelize. So it's good to get these going while we have everything in the oven kind of cooking for us. So I do need to peel them first. And I'm gonna go ahead and get them cooking in a different pot. I've got a pot here. You could use the same pot that the onions, or not the onions, that the bacon is cooking in, but I kind of want to get everything cooking and going just because I know caramelized onions can take a while. I want these to be cooking while the bacon is cooking at the same time. But if you want to save yourself a dish, cook it in the same pot. Just take the cooked bacon out of the pot and leave some of that bacon grease in there and caramelize your onions in that. Our cranberry sauce is done, so we can get our onions on right here. I'm gonna add a little bit of oil in here, get that going, along with some salt to help draw out the moisture on this. And this is gonna start caramelizing for us. We need to run this through a sieve. The recipe says to put this into a blender and blend it first, but I think I can skip that step. I think I can just, maybe not. It's pretty thick. Okay, there we go. It's going through the sieve now. There we go. This will just take me a minute. So the way that this recipe is written, it says that you should take this cranberry mixture, throw it in a blender with confectioner sugar and vanilla and corn syrup. Well, I am happy with this consistency. I can't imagine putting this and adding a bunch of confectioner sugar to it. I tasted it, it's plenty sweet. So I think between the sweetness from the cheesecake and what we've got here, I'm not gonna add any confectioner sugar because this is basically a set cranberry sauce. I did double the cranberries in the water and the sugar because I was thinking that this is what I was gonna do, and I just couldn't imagine adding powdered sugar to it. So I'm kind of adapting this recipe just a little bit because I think this is gonna be just plenty delicious the way it is. And so here I'm just taking my spatula and I'm getting all this goodness off the sieve because most of the cranberry sauce we've run through this smooth, beautiful, it's basically cranberry jelly we've just made is on the actual sieve because it's such thick, beautiful richness. Now I can hear that cooking away. I'm gonna turn this stove way down because I'm not looking to brown my onions, I'm looking to caramelize my onions. And if I have that stove on too high, they're gonna get too brown too quick. And I think this is done. So we can go ahead and top our cheesecake. Let me see if I can get any more through. My stuffing is done. I have it in my other oven just on warm. And then this, the gratin, is almost done. So when that's done, I'll put it on in with the other. Oh shoot, didn't want to do that. I wanted to keep this edge nice and clean, so let's clean that up. As good as new. This cranberry sauce, so good. So what I did instead is I doubled the cranberries, I doubled the water, and I quadrupled the sugar because I didn't add the confectioner sugar. So delicious. Going in the refrigerator to set up. And how beautiful is that cranberry orange cheesecake? So our gratin, I think, is done. It is. And that needs to cool, and it needs to come out of the oven. I need to get that cheesecake back in the refrigerator so that the cranberry sauce can completely set. Oh, wow. That is beautiful. You know, I think I'm gonna let it brown up just a tad bit more in the oven. Another 5 minutes. Our bacon is starting to render. We're starting to get a little bit of color on our onions. And while we put this back in the fridge, we can actually make the rest of the ingredients we need for the dip. I want the bacon really crispy for this dip. So we're gonna give this a good, maybe five or 6 more minutes. Give the onions a stir. To the dip, I have cream cheese, and I'm gonna add some pepper to that. A 1/2 cup of grated Parmesan cheese. A 1/2 cup of mayonnaise. And we're gonna mix this together. I did put that cream cheese in the microwave for about 15 seconds or so that it was soft and I would be able to mix it together. And now we're just waiting for the bacon and for the onions to go into this. The recipe doesn't call for this, but I think I want to add a little bit of green. So I'm just going to add a pinch of some freeze-dried parsley flakes. And we're going to mix that in. Chives, I think, would be really good in this. Well, I think parsley's good because we're going to get that onion flavor from the onions. Maybe a couple pinches. That's perfect. That is so easy. I think our bacon is nice and crispy now at this point, so I'm gonna go ahead and take it. I'm gonna turn the heat off. I've got a plate with some paper towels on it. We're gonna drain the grease off this because we want nice crispy pieces of bacon. This right here, my friend, is the color we are looking for. This, to me, is pure gold. I don't know if there's anything better than some really good caramelized onions. I'm gonna turn the stove off and we're gonna get this into our dip. One of my biggest canning mishaps ever is I tried pressure canning caramelized onions and they were horrible, absolutely awful. And I want to try to get some caramelized onions preserved up. And when I did that, a few of you guys have given me some recommendations. So I'm going to do some experimenting with getting some caramelized onions put up so that I don't have to spend 30 to 40 minutes caramelizing them anytime and every time I want them. But that is for another day. We're gonna finish up our dip by putting some of our bacon in here. And then we're gonna mix this up. So the rest of that bacon I'll just put in the fridge and we'll probably have that, you know, throughout the coming week. I'll find something to put it in. Oh my goodness, look at this. Whew, this is pure perfection right here. So what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna get this into this baking dish. Now that we've got it all mixed up beautifully. Like, look at the color of that. I'm glad I added the parsley because I think the little bit of green is nice to this. If you don't like mayonnaise, you could probably substitute sour cream for that. I think that would be really good. I actually think I would probably prefer it that way because I prefer sour cream over mayonnaise, but I just tasted this and it tastes absolutely incredible. We are going to top with some more Parmesan cheese. And we are gonna pop this dip in a 400-degree oven for about 20 minutes until it's ooey gooey and bubbly. Anytime you're making a dip like this, a creamy, warm, well, not anytime, but for the most part, if you're making like a jalapeno popper dip, a warm corn dip, a warm like queso dip, a lot of times you can make the dip in advance and pop it in the refrigerator. Like if I was going to make this in advance right now, before I put it in the oven, I would pop it in the refrigerator, wrap it up, and then the day of the party, pull it out, put it in the oven, probably about 30 minutes for this one before your guests arrive, because it will be cold, so it'll take probably an extra 10 minutes or so. And then you can have a hot dip, or you could put a dip like this in one of those mini crock pots and turn that on probably about an hour before your guests arrive. So one tip when you're having a party and you don't want to make, say you're gonna have like 3 or 4 dips, you're having a football party, or you're responsible for the dips for the holiday event, then you could make all of them, almost all of them, in advance. Look at that. Our gratin has been sitting long enough, we can actually cut into it and it will hold its shape. Our stuffing is also done, and I'm excited to give that a try as well. That smells divine. Now we're gonna get a spoon and I'm gonna dish out some of this stuffing. Stuffing is one of those things that never just totally looks super appetizing, but this one looks pretty over the top with the cranberries in it. And let's see if this is a winner and if this is something that we might want on our Thanksgiving table. That is really good. I would say, honestly, the cranberries don't give that much flavor to it. I was thinking as this was baking, it might be really good to experiment and put fresh cranberries in there and get some of that tartness that you get from a fresh cranberry. This is really, really good. I don't know if my overall family would want this over my grandma's just traditional stuffing, but we are definitely going to enjoy this. I think the key in this stuffing is the homemade bread. The texture on that is amazing. And I know some people are stuffing people and some people are not. I am personally one who loves it, and I think that that is really good. I probably will stick to my grandma's just traditional stuffing recipe, but we will certainly enjoy that. Now I'm trying to cut this gratin to give this a try. I mean, this is a winner. This rivals any funeral potatoes out there. Don't get me wrong, cheesy potatoes or funeral potatoes, they're kind of viral right now, but my aunt's been making those every Christmas and I still absolutely love those, and we will be making them this Christmas. But this is an elevated version of that, and the Gruyere cheese, it is a more expensive cheese, so the holidays is a perfect time to put it in your grocery budget. So yummy. Now it's time to try our dip, and I think I want to try it with an apple because that potato was so rich. I think a nice crispy apple with this cheesy, bacony, oniony goodness is just going to be amazing. But you could serve this. This dip, though, doesn't have to be with apples. It could be with crackers or vegetables or whatever you have on hand. That dip is incredibly rich. I think if I was to make that caramelized onion dip again, I would probably leave out the bacon. I do have a dip that I usually make that's a French onion dip, and it's a little bit different than that one, and it doesn't have bacon, and I think I prefer it without the bacon, but that is really, really good. Now, these two desserts turned out beautiful. We have our upside down apple caramel dessert and our cranberry orange cheesecake. I am sending those off to the dental office I used to work at. They are gonna get these to enjoy tomorrow at work. And so I don't wanna cut into them right now. I will write right here what we thought of them and I will rate them, but I don't wanna bring half or cut into desserts to gift to a dental office. So I'm gonna keep them just like that. I just want to say thank you for taking time out of your day to spend time with me as we tested out some new recipes, as we tried to play with some tried and true recipes, see if we can kind of elevate them a little bit. And sometimes sticking with the tried and true is the way to go. And that's one reason I wanted to kind of test the stuffing recipe before Thanksgiving to see if it's something we want on our Thanksgiving table. And now that is absolutely delicious. I think my family is going to prefer my grandma's tested and true recipe that we're used to for the holidays. But Josh and I are going to enjoy that stuffing for dinner tonight, and there's gonna be enough leftovers, we'll be able to have it for lunch as well. So thank you so much. Don't forget these recipes will be linked down below if you're interested in trying any of them out yourself. And I can pop a couple of my other videos here. You can go enjoy between now and my next upload. If you are interested in a hosting course and how to have a stress-free hosting event where you can invite people into your home and create lifelong memories without all the stress and craziness that can go along with that, that course will be linked down below as well. So thank you for being here. Thank you for being you. Happy holidays, and I can't wait to see you next time. Bye, friend.